This is probably the last video that you expected to see on your feed. I'm sorry that I've been away for so long, quite frankly, especially in an unceremonious nature. Just leaving without having any exact precedent as to why that individual left often does feel bad. I think back to a YouTuber that I used to really like, Husky Starcraft, and that's exactly what he did. He just kind of left, didn't have any video to explain why he left, and it just felt really bad to me. And I think that's why I'm making this video, at least partially. I want to explain why I left, but more importantly, I want to talk about the current state of Magic and also probably why I'm not going to be playing much at all anymore. I'm going to be playing with my friends occasionally, that sort of thing, but it's going to be sparse compared to what it used to be. And I also have virtually, maybe practically, no intention whatsoever of buying any future Magic product. And that has a lot to do with Wizards, the company, and also other things circulating around Wizards themselves, which we're going to get into in this video. I would implore Wizards employees to watch this video thoughtfully. I'm not presenting any of this material to be malicious. I'm presenting it, as a sort of expository way of hopefully opening up the dialogue a little bit more about the problems of things like Universes Beyond, which are going to be in this video. I also want to point out some sort of bureaucratic things that annoy me about the current situation of MTG and also the format of Commander. And I think that this requires somebody to have at least an open mindset to hear me out. I promise, I'm not being malicious when I'm going to go over these things. It's just exclusively how I've been feeling. And I think especially to the viewership that I have left behind, you're also sort of searching for an explanation as to why I left. And that's going to all completely be in this video. Just stick around for me and don't click off of it. It's going to be a lengthy one, but all of this material is pertinent. And I also want to throw this out there. I think that this material in some ways is pertinent beyond the fact of me leaving. It's pertinent to the game as a whole and where the game is going to go. And I also want to leave the door open for myself and for other people to get re-engaged with Magic the Gathering in the future. I love this game. It brought me some of my greatest friendships that I've had, at least in my adult life, and I don't want to discard that or underplay that. But I also think that we, as a collective group, need to be critical, and the folks at Wizards need to at least show the smallest amount of willingness to listen, which unfortunately I think has sort of fallen on deaf ears of late. So I think the best place to start is Universes Beyond, so let's just get right into that. So there's been a lot of coverage of Universes Beyond stuff over the past probably 2 months. I've been really late to the party here, but I've been collecting my own thoughts and also getting some receipts together. There's going to be links in the description to sort of my citations, my sources. So if you're at all interested in looking at any of this further for yourself and making your own decision about it, you're more than welcome to do that. That's all going to be down in the description. But if you want it laid out for you, this is probably the sort of little push that got me moving away from MTG, and that is Universes Beyond. So I think a little bit of background is important. When I first got into the game, it was around the release for Battles for Baldur's Gate, maybe AFR, sort of that time period where they released them, not necessarily back to back, but in close succession. And I remember being interested to get into the game partly because of AFR and Battle for Baldur's Gate, which is kind of funny because a Universes Beyond product, admittedly a very good Universes Beyond product, one that fits into sort of the canon of Magic, let me throw that little staple in there, was the reason that I got into the game. And now, funny enough, all the way like later down the line, multiple years later, Universes Beyond is one of the reasons, at least, that I'm moving away from the game. And I think that after going over some things here, you're going to also sort of feel the same, or at least hopefully that's my goal, at least to open your mind to the possibility that there has been some rather underhanded things that have been done by Wizards, which unfortunately I think we as a community should not overlook. In fact, I think it's sort of up to us to hold the company accountable. And part of the way that we do that is voting with our wallet. Part of the way that we do that is this. It's community outreach. It's making videos, and hopefully they're here to listen. So I first want to start with what Universes Beyond is actually good at. Because I got into the game with AFR and Battle for Baldur's Gate, and I thought that those settings were really good. They were perfect to represent what Universes Beyond should be in the game. Now, I think that sort of gets at the crux of it immediately, which is Universes Beyond is exceptionally good at demonstrating a setting. It's really excellent at allowing you to sort of survey the broader spectrum of whatever the IP is through the setting. If it's something that's episodic, for instance, that's probably not going to be the best. And I have a comment from a recent video. I'll throw it up on screen, of course. But I'm going to read the comment out to you because I think it really sums up this thought beautifully. This person says, I have a somewhat unique perspective on this because I was a creative director of a digital TCG, and the CEO made a deal with Paramount to bring the Star Trek IP into the game. The CEO came in and just forced us to make the next set Star Trek, specifically the Next Generation. It was a disaster. In many ways, it was the beginning of the end for that team of developers. All of us liked Star Trek, but nobody was excited to work on the project. I think the CEO was the only person in the world excited by it, to be honest. The art team got really discouraged because they'd submit artistic renderings of characters in the show, and the actors, or their agents, I was never sure, would turn down the art and say it had to be more accurate to the actor. Basically, all the artwork ended up being paint-overs of shots of the show, and it was the only art that would get approved. And the art team was super discouraged. The player base hated it, and the set didn't sell, and was a huge loss for the company. I think that WotC will do a much better job with the property than we did. They have the resources to bring in subject matter experts and give the set resources that it needs. But there's an element I found that all these sorts of Universes Beyond properties that's really deterministic of how well it's received. What's the core appeal of the original property, and how well does it translate to a TCG? Star Trek's appeal at its core is all about these short stories that pose interesting philosophical questions, and that just doesn't come across in a TCG. Spider-Man's appeal is in a single character, and tangentially, some villains and alternate versions of that character. And again, a TCG is generally bad at that. TCGs excel at depicting a setting, but not a narrative, and at gameplay decisions. Middle-earth, Warhammer, and Final Fantasy all align with this. Marvel and Star Trek simply just don't. So I want to let that just sink in because I not only did this comment get a ton of thumbs ups or upvotes, however you want to say it, but I think this comment really hits the nail on the head. Universes Beyond at its best is really, really strong. It's a great idea because not only are we going to capture other people from alternate IPs like Warhammer or Final Fantasy, for instance, or Lord of the Rings. What a great choice. And in fact, I think that those are probably my three favorites, even though I didn't really engage with Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy felt like it fit. It had the expansive setting and the ability to tell a greater story through the TCG. And unfortunately, when we're looking at things like Star Trek or Doctor Who that is episodic in nature, it just doesn't gel well. When you look at those sets and the way that they've been received, especially the Spider-Man set, which has come out recently, and we're going to talk about that, those things just flop in comparison. In comparison, mind you. Now, there are a lot of people that buy the product, and I'm sure that the sales figures have been going up for Wizards as a result of implementing the Universes Beyond stuff. But ultimately, this is a bureaucratic and lawyer-based decision more so than a creative-focused decision. I guarantee that if there were a poll to be completed, a nonpartisan poll from people at WotC who are actually working on the game, I think that we would get a similar response across the board, which is the creative freedoms of which maybe they've previously had if people are, carryovers from the early MTG space. Those types of freedoms are limited because at this point they are beholden to these other IPs to tell a story, even if that IP does not seem to sort of go well with the overall MTG story and the MTG themes that we've already had in place. I think that this is a pretty good groundwork because I've just elicited that the Universes Beyond as a whole is not a problem. In fact, there are some sets that I think fit in so seamlessly, so excellent, that I wish they would do it again. And they are doing The Hobbit this upcoming year, which I think is a fine IP, to be honest, to incorporate into Magic the Gathering. But when we're looking at the likes of Marvel or Spider-Man, for instance, especially when there are these mechanically unique cards that show up in these sets, it's ridiculous. It's not befitting of the setting, and we're going to get into some of those other mechanical differences coming up. But yeah, I love Warhammer, Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons. Of course, these are all great settings. So I think that we have to start by talking about some of the flavor failures to sort of bridge the gap between this and the other discussion of UB that I have. So I want to just bring up a couple cards from one of the recent sets. Of course, I'm going to dunk on Spider-Man. Everybody's been doing it, I guess. It's the popular thing, I suppose. But when I'm looking at the set and I'm looking at the cards that have gone into this, first we have to keep in mind that initially this was supposed to be a more limited release, and then they expanded it to a full standard set. And I think that bloat that happens secondarily is obvious. When we're looking at cards like City Pigeon or Rent is Due or Imposter Syndrome, using this specifically because of the art that it demonstrates. It's a meme. It's a meme of the real world, and it's in my card game. Taxi Driver, and of course, Bagel and Schmear. This is just completely inconsequential stuff on my cards. And this also is a direct analog to the real world. We're putting in the real world at this point. And again, remember what I said at the beginning, setting. Spider-Man, Miles Morales, etc., is the real world. Marvel is the real world through a sort of fictitious or sci-fi lens. And yes, you could make an argument that that is enough to put it into one of these other settings. For instance, I even think back to like Arabian Nights, for instance. This is just sort of like that set from MTG, at least, is sort of like what a white guy's idea of the Arabic geographical location would have been like. But the difference is they relied heavily on the fantasy elements and they incorporated that, like Shahrazad, for instance, or Aladdin's Lamp or Flying Carpet, even like the Bazaar of Baghdad. That art has this really fantastical artwork. And I think that does a lot of heavy lifting. Even in these sets, it didn't directly represent the real world. And even though it was in theory sort of an analog for what we're currently talking about, it's a real world representation through a largely Universes Beyond product, Arabian Nights that is, it fits the theming because it's highly fantasized and it's something that was clearly well constructed or at least well thought through at the time. But when we're looking at cards like City Pigeon or Bagel and Schmear, or putting in a modern meme into the card game like Imposter Syndrome, it's just hard to sort of break out of that shell and give this set sort of the leeway that you would otherwise want to give a set to allow it to fit in better into the MTG sphere. I also think that the SpongeBob cards are the same. Now, I love SpongeBob, don't get me wrong. I could quote dozens, maybe hundreds of lines from that show. I grew up on this show. I love that IP. And you know what? I'm not even that mad because they're not mechanically unique cards that were printed in the SpongeBob Secret Lair. But the thing is, when I see that show up at my table, it does the same thing. It brings you out of this fantasy world because this is clearly a setting of which is unbefitting to go into the MTG sphere. And I think that's the big takeaway I need folks at Wizards to hear first and foremost, right at the front of the video, 14 minutes in, lull. But that's it. Setting. These sets that we just talked about do not fit into the MTG space as seamlessly as previously mentioned sets like Warhammer or AFR or Baldur's Gate. These things are easier to look past because they fit so well into the pre-existing setting of what MTG has grown to become. And I think that's what we need to look at moving forward. So I think that what this bridges us into is the history of UB. Obviously, I mentioned things like Arabian Nights, but I'm going to leave out Arabian Nights and P3K for this argument because those were not truly like the UB sets like we're used to. It's not modern IPs of which we would ascribe a clear difference to compared to what Magic the Gathering has been. So Universes Beyond really starts on October 4th, 2020. And pardon me, I have to have my phone up for all this. That is the Walking Dead release. Many of you are either rolling your eyes or you're screaming at the screen right now because this was a very divisive release. This was broaching territory that had never previously been tread upon. So on October 4th, 2020, they come out with a secret layer, and it gets a ridiculous criticism. And why? Well, these cards are mechanically unique. These are secret layer cards that sold out in a very short time span, were extremely expensive for the price, especially on the secondary market because of scalpers. And that's a whole nother topic that I think we should talk about later in the video, is just how, WotC has set up its distribution program, which is just completely predatory for you, the consumer. Keep that in mind too. But this product gets released, gets a lot of blowback from the community because these are mechanically unique cards. They're basically cost prohibitive for most people to get a hold of them. And so Mark Rosewater famously is placating us. He's trying to smooth over this. So let's talk about September 28th, 2020. Mark responds to a criticism that he receives on his Blogatog, which is basically just a subdivision of Tumblr. And the person MD Brian 84 asked or stated, "I just wanted to express my opinion that this secret layer is a very, very dangerous slope to go down. Have you guys not learned from the Nalthany Dragon and Nexus of Fate? Also, these are essentially being printed directly to the reserved list since WotC won't own the licensing forever, which is something stated would not happen." Now, Mark responds to this, and he says, quote, while the secret layer is the one chance to get the Walking Dead versions of these cards, we have the ability to print the Magic versions of these cards in future products. So let's say Negan becomes a popular commander. We can print the Magic version, same card mechanically, but with the Magic name and art, in any number of future products. This is not a case of us being unable to make more of a popularly played card. So I got to point out first off that this is a sort of sneaky response. Mark completely dismissed the question here. So this is going to become a theme, especially in the public, public communication from WotC. They're very dodgy about what they say, and Mark is really good at this. You can tell from the way that he handled this. He addressed the fact that the card is going to be reprinted in the future. But notice how he never once mentioned how far in the future the card was going to be reprinted. Notice how he never said how far the limitations of the rights to reprint these cards extends. Is it a year? Is it 2 years and then we can reprint it? Am I supposed to just wait until you just tell me so? Jump when you say to jump? It's hard to know how far out I need to be holding out before I purchase these cards, especially if it's something new and shiny and I want to play it. The only other opportunity, for me at least, is to proxy the card if it's something that's going to be excessively expensive. But that's not really the concern. This person wants to, presumably, buy these products, buy these cards, and support WotC so they can make more sets. But we're being told, just don't worry about it, effectively, is the response, which I just don't think it's good enough. This is hand waving at its finest. It's just, trust me, bro, we'll reprint it in the future. Don't worry about it. But how can I trust you? Like, you're not giving me anything concrete here. You're saying that we can reprint these cards in the future, but when are you actually going to do that? I'll tell you when they're going to do that. September 8th, 2023. 3 years later, by the way. It was the Wilds of Eldraine release, and this probably snuck under a lot of people's radars, but this was the very first time that we were given in-universe printed versions of these cards 3 years later. But not only were they reprinted in Wilds of Eldraine, they were reprinted to the list. So it wasn't a card exclusive to WoW. This was exclusively on the list, and of the 6 cards that were a part of the original Walking Dead secret layer, all of them got an in-universe treatment. But the Universes Beyond reprints in the in-universe versions on the list were 6 of 67 cards on the list for the Wilds of Eldraine set. And moreover, on that list of the other cards, you only had about a 20 to 25% chance of pulling a card from the list in your pack. So just to get one of the 6 cards, which is a part of this in-universe reprint from a secret layer, which you could have just purchased outright, mind you, you could just guaranteed 100% get the cards that you were guaranteed to get through the Walking Dead secret lair, by the way, you would have about a 2% chance of just pulling a card. 1 of 6, by the way. So if we're talking about pulling an individual card, like let's say you wanted Negan or Rick or something like that, you're looking at odds of less than 1%. And ultimately the cost, like the differential of the amount you would pay in purchasing packs to get that card, realistically, statistically speaking, versus just getting it on the secondary market at a still insane price, by the way, is not compatible, meaning you're probably better off just buying it on the secondhand market, and you probably would have been better off just buying the scalped versions of the Walking Dead cards on the secondary market. So although the prophecy did come true, although it was factual that the cards themselves got a reprint from WotC, it got a reprint in a way that was not very advantageous to you, the consumer, is it? You have to open tons of packs to get these cards. You're going to end up spending a ton of money in the process as well in order to get these cards, or you have to get them on the secondary market, which is basically completely separate from WotC to begin with. Ergo, like if you wanted to support the company, it's like you're not given a great way to do that, to get the in-universe version. It's sort of like the monkey's paw, where it's like, oh, I wish that I could get a reprint of these cards. And the monkey's paw goes, wish granted, bro. However, you're going to have a less than 1% chance to pull anything that you actually want out of the set. And I get it. You can make an argument that this is the same for like other chase cards and sets, like any set throughout Magic history. But I do think that there is a categorical difference here. The difference is these cards were printed and then we were promised to get an in-universe reprint from Mark Rosewater. And yeah, I mean, he did follow up on it, but we had to wait 3 years first in order to get the reprint. We had to then trudge through tons of packs at a less than 1% chance to actually get access to the card that you might otherwise want. And it just feels disingenuous. When we're told, don't worry about it, just trust me, it's going to be fine. That's what we're building up a repertoire here of, or a list of these. So I want to move on from this. So WotC actually published an article in February 25th, 2021. They announced that UB, Universes Beyond, was going to be this new and ongoing addition to the Magic the Gathering world. And they actually had a specific post about this on their actual website, by the way. Again, links in the description. Hopefully they don't take it down as a result of this video. The verbatim response was, or the post was, you're going to love this, trust me. There will also be the occasional standalone product like The Walking Dead, but the intention is to typically make Universes Beyond as available as any other Magic product. Way to follow up on that, guys. Just applause all around. I'm sure you actually thought that. Anyways, continuing. That said, Universes Beyond cards will not be standard legal. From their website, by the way, will not be standard legal. I'm reading this verbatim. We strive to make Magic cards that are widely useful, but Universes Beyond will be above and, well, beyond our normal standard releases. Yet another promise, not going to be standard legal. So nothing much is changing with our normal cadence of releases for standard. Also a lie, look at that. This is purely a cool thing we're doing in addition to all the other cool things that we're already doing. So yeah, I mean, it's just a complete lie. Like the entire post is deleted by the subsequent what's the right word, breaches in trust from WotC that have currently been demonstrated. I mean, we have 7 standard legal sets coming out this upcoming year, and 4 of them are Universes Beyond. So I mean, this is just as blatant of a lie as you can get based on that. It was October 2024. It was announced that Universes Beyond is going to be standard legal moving forward. I feel like this just needs to be thrown out there because Mark later down the line, maybe I should just continue. So, oh God, September 2025, Mark is responding to somebody on Tumblr. The guy's name is epic. It's Funny Joe Mama. He asked, if every promise about Universes Beyond can be walked back because quote unquote enough people wanted it, why doesn't that apply to the reserved list? Valid question. Mark responds by saying, quote, Us explaining our current plans with Universes Beyond was not a promise that it would always be that way. Really? The reserve list, in contrast, was us specifically saying we promised to never do this thing. Okay, a few things. So, first off, bold-faced lie. Clearly a lie. I mean, maybe you could just say, oh, it was misinformed or we misinterpreted it. I don't think so. It was very clear what they said about it. It was not going to be standard legal. That was a promise that was made to the players who were concerned about this because people don't want to have to chase after cards and sets that are outside of Magic IP in order to play something like standard or modern, which we've clearly seen has been breached. Mark also is completely disregarding the prior post from WotC's direct website stating that they were not going to make anything standard legal from Universes Beyond. And again, this hand-waving dismissiveness of just like, trust me, bro, just believe me. Just believe me because I say it. It kind of reminds me of our current administration, honestly. Just like this hand-waving, like, oh, this is exactly how it went down. And then you show receipt after receipt of it being the opposite. This is exactly what's happening right here. We've been told one thing and they're executing something completely different, and it just does not build trust within the community. Now, the other thing, which if you're an astute viewer, you already know what I'm going to talk about, is Magic 30. So Mark said specifically in the post, we promise not to do this thing. What is he implying? He's implying that we promise to never reprint any card that is on the reserve list. Again, a lie. When we get to Magic 30, they are posturing packs worth $250 a piece. If you wanted to get the full 4-pack collection, it was like around $1,000. I think it was a little bit less because you're buying 4 packs, but truthfully, does it matter? What are you actually telling your audience when you're offering up these packs at $250+ a piece and telling them, no, this is not a reprint, guys. This is just a fun little proxy, an official proxy, if you will, that you get to play with. Ooh, official proxy. No, that's a reprint. And the reserve list has been infringed upon. It's very clear that it's been infringed upon. Just look at the prices of some of the dual lands from this reprinted set because people put value behind this thing because you, Wizards, decided to release this product at $1,000 for 4 packs. If that's not capitalistic greed at its worst, especially because you're breaking prior promises that was made to the community, then I don't know what it is. And yes, WotC could come back and sit there and say, no, our hands are clean of this. We never actually said that we reprinted these cards. These are proxied versions. These are official proxies of our game. Do you believe that? Like, actually, do you believe that? Like, are you up at night comfortable with yourself knowing that you so blatantly lie to people that play this game? How ridiculous. Do you think that the Magic community is that stupid to not understand that what you just did is cash in on the nostalgia of the reserve list by promoting an official, quote unquote, official proxy of something and charging an exorbitant amount? We know very clearly from research data that shows people ascribe value to something if it is presented at a higher price point. This is like it's kind of been debunked, but it's kind of like the wine example that people get a lot where it's like, oh yeah, taste this wine. And you tell them that it's like a $500 wine, even though it's like a $5 cheapo bottle. And even if they are like a sommelier, they are like, oh, this is so complex on the palate. It's so interesting. All of a sudden that, $5 bottle of wine turns into a $500 bottle of wine because the perception of the consumer, of you. And because of the way they marketed it, because of the way they priced the material itself, I don't see it as anything other than a blatant manipulation of people's preferences and capturing the nostalgia of the reserve list through an official reprint. Whether that reprint is of proxies or not, it really doesn't matter. You infringed upon the reserve list. And how are we supposed to trust that you're not going to do it again? How are we supposed to trust you at all? Because there's these promises which are supposed to be inviolable, but you're going out of your way to make sure that you are reprinting these things anyway and dismissing people's concerns about it. And you're also dismissing people's concerns about Universes Beyond, hand-waving and saying things like, oh, we never promised that these sets would not be in standard. You did. It was on your website. It is undeniable. It's on your website that you said it's not going to be in standard. And then just a couple years later, it's in standard. Now, I would get it in some sense, even though it would still be messed up, if you on the official post on the WotC website said something like, yeah, we don't think it's going to be in standard, but we can't make any promises to you as the player base, yada, yada. But that's not what you said. You said it's not going to be in standard. You said that it's going to be an accessory printing to the already consistent cadence, that's your word, cadence, of releases for standard. You went out of your way to not only lie, or rather, perhaps the more realistic version of this is the employees that were told to do this later down the line got the shaft from the lawyers and the bureaucrats that are currently sitting the board at Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, of course. And they were told, just do it. We need to make as much money as possible. That's what this smacks of. Capitalistic greed and a complete disregard to you, the player, because you've been lied to on numerous different occasions. Your trust has been violated, plain and simple. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, because that's just the receipts of what we've been promised in the past. That's also just talking about what UB is good at. But that doesn't even encapsulate the power grab, the power level of some of these cards that are printed in the Universes Beyond sets. Now, I think I could go on for a really long time talking about various cards, but I think I need to talk about the most glaring example that was printed, and that is the One Ring. So the One Ring was released on June 23rd, 2023. And then in Modern, it received an official ban on December 16th, 2024. That's a duration of 542 days. That's a long, long time for a completely format warping card to be available for utilization in Modern. So I want to give a couple examples. So first and foremost, Hogak. Hogak was, everybody's like, oh my God, Hogak, jump scare. Was released in June 14th, 2019. It was banned on August 26th, 2019 Modern. 73 days, by the way. That card is in stark contrast to the One Ring, because Hogak got up to approximately 40% participation across all decks in the bigger premier tournaments for Modern. And that card got banned. The One Ring sat at 40% for like a year. And then it got up to 60%. The card was format breaking for a long time. It was so clear that this card was breaking the format. But why do we not ban it? Especially if it can go in every deck. At least Hogak was color gated to green and black, right? But the One Ring goes in every single deck, and it's just as pervasive. And oh yes, by the way, it's more pervasive. It got up to 60+% of participation before it finally got banned. This feels like an oversight at the sort of least bad outcomes of this, but it feels like forceful manipulation and again, smacking of a bureaucratic capitalistic sense at the worst, which is probably what it really was. When we're looking at other cards, I want to just briefly touch on Tarmogoyf, because Tarmogoyf came out in 2007. It never really received a formal ban in Modern, but again, the card specifically was for green. And the card had to, especially in the beginning, get splashed into very specific color pairings. For instance, for quite a while, there was a deck that ran entirely blue cards. There was no green cards except for a 4 of Tarmogoyf, because Tarmogoyf requires these other card types like sorceries and instants and planeswalkers and that sort of thing to show up in the bin, and in order to grow and be useful. And that just didn't really coincide with the other green decks. So not only did it take a little bit of time for Tarmogoyf to actually get off the ground and get utilized, it also needed to be in a specific color pairing. And even at some of the peak utilization rates, I was checking this out. Some of the highest I could find were around 30% or so of use, because there were other viable ways of playing Modern at the time and other ways of counteracting the strategy of Tarmogoyf, despite the fact that it was a very powerful card. Obviously it was. I'm not saying it wasn't. And in fact, it was an error. It was supposed to be one more generic mana, I believe. But that card was, in some people's minds, format breaking, but it never really got past sort of like that 30% utilization rate, even at the peak. And it was also gated to a specific color, which was not quite as ubiquitous at the time. Things like blue and black were still better. And I want to move on to one final example, and that's Splinter Twin. And this one's just funny. Why is it funny? Because it got unbanned at the time that the One Ring got banned. So Splinter Twin gets unbanned. And the question is, why did it ever get banned in the first place? So it showed up in a peak of 13 to 15% of decks. I looked all over. Those are the numbers I could find. If somebody wants to correct me in the comments down below, you're more than welcome to. In fact, I would encourage you to do so. But the rationale that was cited by WotC for the ban of Splinter Twin was that it did not promote enough play diversity. Do you hear the angels singing about the One Ring and the play diversity of 60%? I think so. This is just so ridiculous. The One Ring was showing up in a large percentage of decks for the entire duration that it was actually out. It dominated Modern for the entire time it was out, 500 plus days, when they had previously banned things like Hogak in 70 days when they saw it showed up in 40% of decks or high 30s or something. And then even in the instance of Splinter Twin, yeah, it's powerful. Yeah, it had some game-breaking combos, but it's like 10 to 12%. And you're saying that that's a problem because it doesn't promote diversity. There's been a clear shift in the mentality at WotC. And I think the shift is greed. The reason why you would not ban the One Ring when it was so clearly violating all these prior ban decisions that WotC had made is because they want to promote shareholder value. They're afraid that if they do an early ban on a card like this, what's going to end up happening is the other people that are investing in their products, so people from the outside looking in who want to invest in their own IP through Magic the Gathering, might be disincentivized, because if they see that they're not able to tactfully handle these types of cards and balance them, well, that doesn't really foster a lot of trust with the company that would be doing the investment into the card game. And of course, it just shows incompetence that they're unable to balance it properly. So these things in mind, it's like the decision to not ban the One Ring, especially when we have just receipt after receipt after receipt of cards that were banned for way less infringement on the play style of Modern and the total play percentage in Modern, is just ridiculous. It's clearly demonstrating that this is a financial decision more so than the company actually caring about the player. And I think that this is just one of the things that just drove me insane. Like a couple years ago when I was looking at these numbers and I was just like, how do people see this and they're okay with it? Because this is just clear corruption on the sense of, we've previously had these set of standards and we've just done away with it. The standards are gone. And if somebody wants to argue that 40 to 60% utilization of a card that can show up in every deck and is mega powerful and wins games completely by itself is balanced, sure, make the argument, I guess. But I don't think anyone's going to come to your defense. I think that it's very clear that this is a breach of the trust of people, of the player base in Magic. And it's also just demonstrating that the burden of the production and the burden of showing a group of individuals that the cards can be not only fair and balanced, but also enjoyable and playable has shifted from the burden of the commonality, the civility, the people who play the game, and has shifted to a group of shareholders who really should have nothing to do with this game. So this is like one of those things where you start to get to the argument of like, oh, well, if the cards are that powerful, if it's a set that you don't like, oh, if you've been lied to, don't worry about it. Just don't engage with the product. I forget who it was exactly at WotC, but there was a public announcement during one of their live streams where they literally said something to the effect of, yeah, if it's a product that you don't like, just don't buy it. Just don't buy it, bro. Okay, dude, sorry. I guess I just shouldn't have bought the freaking thing. I don't know. Shouldn't have invested all these years of playing in this game and all the years of figuring out the lore just to get completely dismissed by the people who are supposed to be, sort of the representatives of the community. But anyways, this gets to a great point. you really can't play any of these cards without buying an IP you might not be fond of. And even if you don't play them, you can't avoid other people playing them. So this is true for modern and standard, of course, at like the top level, because these cards that are getting printed in these sets are so strong that they have to show up in modern. So if you want to be competitive, even in the slightest, you have to use these cards. And even in the more casual formats like Commander, especially because now we've sort of reached a critical mass of cards, you are going to encounter Universes Beyond probably at every single pod. And why do I say that? I say that because, get ready for some stats, guys. Brace yourselves. So over 30% of all legendary creatures printed in all of Magic's history are now Universes Beyond characters as of the Avatar release. What the fuck? Like, what is that? It's like, this is just, has become the game itself. And I think that's what people are concerned about. Now, when you show up at a pod, it's not like there's a 1 in 20 chance or 1 in 10 chance that you're going to come across an occasional Universes Beyond commander. You are going to see these cards at every table. And that's just legendary creatures. Let's not even get into the massive quantity of cards that also are Universes Beyond that are not falling into that legendary creature category. Tons and tons of cards that you absolutely cannot avoid because, well, other people are playing them even if you are not. And moreover, I think that the bigger part that bothers me is that many of these cards are mechanically unique, especially due to these power upticks and the incentivizing of the shareholder value. You want to make sure that people are going to buy the damn set. How do you do that? You make cards really powerful. You make them so powerful that you cannot avoid them even if you try, brother. So from that perspective, these cards are not only mechanically unique, not only have they demonstrated the unwillingness to reprint them in any type of meaningful way with an in-universe treatment, but also it's impossible to avoid them through Universes Beyond. Now, these cards are going to get played and they're going to continue to get played. And to me, that was sort of the moment when I realized this like a year and a half ago, that I just need to take a big step back from this, because the game that I fell in love with no longer resembled the game that I was playing. Does that make sense? Because of, again, 30% and all this we've already talked about. It's difficult for somebody who fell in love with the game through the lore. I even bought, it's somewhere in here, you see all the books around me. I bought Magic the Gathering books. I started reading the lore. I loved it. I loved the fact that this was a standalone setting. Well, a standalone setting that through authorship and authorial intent and game design of all things, showed us this incredible setting with rich characters, interesting backstory, unique mechanics. And you know what? Not only was it fun to play, it became easy. Like once you were a part of like the club, like once you kind of knew all the ins and outs of the cards and stuff, it was exhilarating to play. It was so fun. But then when you're sitting down and you're playing your Miles Morales Spider-Man and you do your web slinging ability, and I block with Mr. Krabs, Charix the Raging Isle, and then Aang from Avatar The Last Airbender, I don't know, does some like weird ninjutsu thing, or I'm sure there's an airbending keyword that I'm not familiar with. All of a sudden, it's just like this does not resemble the game that I fell in love with. These are IPs that I love, but it's just like the professor said in one of his most recent videos. I love spaghetti, I love cheesecake, but I don't want spaghetti in my cheesecake. That's what I'm talking about here. I feel like this has been something that has been sort of dismissed, not only by WotC, but by various other members of the community who basically said, listen, if you want to play this game, you just have to accept the fact that it's going to be Universes Beyond. No, I don't. I think that if I want to play the game, I can play it in ways that I don't need to use these cards. The problem is I can't escape them. Even if I said it in one of my prior videos, some of you might remember. I decided I wasn't going to put any Universes Beyond cards in my future decks. And it's becoming increasingly impossible, unfortunately. If you go on EDH Rec and you're looking at commanders, a lot of the top cards are all UB stuff. Not all of it, but a good number of it is. And even if it's not in a mechanically unique card, maybe it's just a reskin of a pre-existing card. Well, you know what? I oftentimes will see those show up at the LGS as well. So it's like, even in the circumstance where I'm not seeing a mechanically unique card that might make me upset, I'm still seeing the Universes Beyond card, and that definitely takes me out of the setting. So I think that there's been some clear demonstration here of a lot of wrongdoing from WotC, and this sort of gets us to the sort of crux of the issue, which is the release schedule, because we just demonstrated that 30% of all legendary creatures are Universes Beyond now. Well, even more startling than that, 4 out of 7 sets for next year, mainline sets, are going to be Universes Beyond. Remember when they said it was just going to be a supplementary product, like an accessory product just for us to enjoy? That was a lie. So the only ones that are getting that I'm interested in really that are getting revisited this next year are Lorwyn and Strixhaven. And that's an important differentiator. We have to use the word revisited because these are not new sections that they're exploring. They're capturing the nostalgia of the player base. And unfortunately, I think that what they're trying to do is sort of garner and harvest that goodwill that they still have left in the player base by putting out some of the sets of which people have been asking for the most. And you know what? It's manipulative. It really is, because they could have tried a different set. There could have been a different direction that they took things in, but they're at the point of either Universes Beyond or doing some type of revisited set, at least for this next year. Now, they did do some mechanically and also stylistically unique sets of the last couple of years. Some of them were great. Some of them were not so great. And I'm not here to talk about those sets. I think it's great. And I think that they should do more of those sets. And in fact, I would encourage WotC to go in that direction. I think if you're still watching from the folks at Wizards of the Coast, this is what people want. They want more Duskmourn. They want Bloomburrow. And yeah, we do want the revisited sets. I do want Lorwyn, actually, and I want Strixhaven. But by God, I'm not going to buy them because you have demonstrated to us clearly that you're willing to manipulate and lie to the people that play this game and also completely dismiss concerns. There's been evidence of apparently studies or polls that have been done from the folks at Wizards of the Coast showing that actually a small percentage of people dislike the Universes Beyond stuff, but they don't publish any of the poll collection data. They don't publish any of the information that goes along with how they got it. If they really wanted to demonstrate to us that this was something that actually was not detested as much as it seems empirically it's detested, they would hire a nonpartisan third-party group to come in and do a poll of the community, not something that's funded necessarily through directly through a department at Wizards of the Coast, not something in affiliation with somebody. You would give us receipts that this was a third-party organization that has no bias or affiliation with you, that's doing a third-party study in order to capture data to properly represent what people really think at WotC, or really think about WotC, and also about the direction of things like Universes Beyond. If anything I've said in the video up to this point, I know it's been long already, resonates with you, let them know in the comments. Like, again, this is one of the ways that change gets made, is there's this community outreach, which is this channel. This is my final video. And I really hope down in my soul that somebody at WotC watches this and they go, yeah, you know what? We have been pretty shitty, actually, haven't we? Maybe we do need to make some changes. Maybe we need to actually publish a formal apology and talk about these things specifically. Don't just make an apology to make an apology. Address it. Address that you were at fault and state that you're going to make categorical changes to the production of further product through Wizards of the Coast and, of course, Magic the Gathering that is going to be befitting of how you once were. Let's return to a time when it was only 70 days of Hogak, the Hogak summer. And then that's it, because they recognized they made a mistake and they banned the card. Let's return to a time when 12% of viability within the modern bracket was not, did not facilitate a strong enough diversity of decks that you were so concerned you banned one of the key cards to make that combo happen, Splinter Twin. That to me is good game stewardship. What's currently happening with the Universes Beyond sets and the publication of just revisited areas, to me, smacks of, again, the capitalistic and determined sense of financial gain rather than actually promoting any type of positive play experience for the player base, and maybe even, like I said, just admitting fault when fault is actually present, when it's clear, especially when there's clear evidence that you have stated things and then your community outreach representative Mark Rosewater goes on to lie about those things not previously being stated. It's clear. The receipts are there. Whether you want to say it's a lie or something else, that's up to you to decide, but it seems quite clear to me. And this is one of the main reasons why I stepped away from the Magic the Gathering side of things. It was just a little bit too much for me to handle. I just felt like I couldn't, in good conscience, continue playing. And moreover, financially supporting these companies, or this company, that previously had a game that I loved. It just felt like a different game. And the statistics show that it is now a different game. So anyways, that's my piece on Universes Beyond. I wrote out a little thing here. This might sync with you guys. They've used up their trust and goodwill that people previously had for Universes Beyond, and it's finally showing. And I'm glad to be a part of that growing majority of players that sees Universes Beyond as a problem. That's where I'm at. All right. So that's Universes Beyond. Again, if you find what I just said truthful, enlightening, maybe you think it's something that needed to be said a long time ago, put it in the comments, man. Just say it, because I think that the folks at WotC need to hear this stuff. So anyways, second section of this video as to why I left from the Magic space was actually a part of the changeover from the rules committee to the Commander Format Advisory Board, or whatever it's called now. It's like run by Gavin Verhey. So I don't know if you guys know this, but I actually interviewed the head of the rules committee after the rules committee had disbanded, because I just wanted to know sort of like the behind the scenes stuff that was going on. And out of respect to him, I'm not going to incorporate that interview here, because truthfully, there was a lot of elucidating that occurred during that interview that made me realize that some of these other personalities and forces that were at play were maybe not in good faith. And I think that the way the community responded, because what happened, if you don't remember, there was a sweep of bans that came out, including Dockside Extortionist, Mana Crypt, what else was in there? Jeweled Lotus. And these cards that ended up getting banned created such a fissure within the community that ultimately there were death threats. And then finally the Commander Rules Committee disbanded, because they felt that the safety and further stewardship of the Commander format had grown to a point where it outstripped their ability to properly facilitate that management that was necessary for the prolongation of this format and the game as a whole. Which, good on them for getting out when they felt they needed to. In fact, one of the members of the original rules committee is still a part of this new format board, which is, I think it's a good thing. I actually, I forget who it is, but their names exactly, but I actually communicated with them over email as well and got some information about stuff, and it further confirmed that there was some not so savory things kind of going on in the background that led to that group dissolving. So my main gripe, hear me out. My main gripe with one of my main gripes with this was actually how it was handled by other representatives outside of the Commander Rules Committee, namely Josh Lee Kwai. So follow me here, because I don't feel this way anymore. I've matured, I suppose, on my stance regarding this, and I want to make it very clear how I felt and then how I feel now. So upon the banning of these cards, Josh Lee Kwai flew back. I forget where he was, but he flew back to the studio, and immediately he basically says it in the video where he's discussing the bans for these cards. He's like, yeah, I flew back and I just sat down and here I am and we're going to talk about it. It was like there wasn't any time to let this sit and digest. He put out a video effectively stating that the bans were made in a hasty way of which they did not properly talk to the other members of the advisory group, which was this accessory group that was supposed to give information to the board so the board could make the decision on what was going to be banned and what wasn't going to be banned. And Josh basically stated that he felt that they did not properly communicate with them prior to the bans taking effect, and that was one of the means or methods that led to them, making this video that was rather vitriolic, unfortunately, I would say, from Josh's perspective from the command zone. If you look at that video, it's like clear, like Rachel is so uncomfortable throughout most of it. It's just very plain. Like Josh is very heated about this and he's saying all these things. And I think that it's hard for Rachel to know what's been happening behind the scenes necessarily, because she has come into this at a later stage and Josh has some history with these other individuals that are a part of the board. I will disclose from my, discussions with members of the initial commander board that got disbanded. They did talk to the advisory board pretty much at length about these bans for a very long period of time. This was not a split decision. It's very clear to me after discussing with actual members from that board that this was a very thoughtful decision. This is something that took a very long period of time. They, in fact, had tons of feedback from the advisory panel about this, including Josh, who gave them information, and they ultimately arrived on the shared decision across the board to ban those cards. This was not something that was done hastily, despite the fact that's what Josh was putting out to the world. And I needed to confirm for myself. That's why I did the interviews. That's why I did the email outreach to clarify these things, because for me, I needed to know. I needed to know, like, am I being lied to by Josh? We kind of were, sort of. I don't want to say lied to. Let me be clear. Josh, if you're watching this video, I'm not saying that you lied in the video. It was your perception of events. And it seems that there was this other group that had a different perception of events as to what happened and why they arrived at the decision that they did. And they believed they did incorporate you into the decision. It sounds like, to me, at least from the discussions that I've had and what I've heard. I want to be very fair to both parties here, because this is not just a unilateral argument here. It's not a unilateral decision. This was very much a joint decision to ban those cards. And I think that it's very clear from my discussions with the board members that that is the case. And again, out of respect, I'm not going to post all of these things because I just feel like this is past now. And moreover, there was a couple things that Josh said that really rubbed me the wrong way in that video where he was talking about his qualms with the bans that happened. And one of the things that Josh argued was, in the event that he died and his loved ones needed to pay for his funeral, how else are they supposed to pay for his funeral if the cards that ended up getting banned by this third-party board impacted the third-party value of the cards in such a way that they lost so much monetary value that they could not afford his funeral? I mean, dude, come on. Like, can you think of a more ridiculous argument to make regarding like the banning of the cards? Not about power level, not about the game impact, but about the financial side of it and about how your family members couldn't afford your funeral. You're just pandering. You're pandering. You're upset. You're pandering. I get it. I get it, Josh. I do. I've been angry too. And you know what? I think that we all have a right to our opinion, but sometimes those opinions maybe don't have time to fully form before we put them out to the world. I have also been victim to this, where I've previously made a video about proxies I wasn't proud of. I took the video down and I've completely changed my perspective on proxies as a result of the community response to that. And this is what I want to talk about. So, two things. Josh comes out later and apologizes for his behavior in the video. Good job. Good job. And I want to say that first and foremost because Josh is somebody that I looked up to strongly. He was somebody who I saw as sort of a paragon of this particular format. He was somebody that was a trailblazer who opened up this format to me and made it easier for me to digest. And moreover, he was an educator. And all these things combined were attributes that I really strongly looked up to. I wanted to sort of, I don't want to say be like Josh, but I wanted to at least imitate some of the things that he did to facilitate his successes in the MTG space. And I felt that the way that he had handled that video was so unbefitting of somebody who should have the authority and the platform that he did, that it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess you could say, because I was already waffling with all these other issues of Universes Beyond and some issues of Burnout, which I'm going to get into. And unfortunately, that just sent me over the edge. I just couldn't handle that. Like, one of my heroes effectively talked so dismissively about this board that I had spoken to, and clearly are very thoughtful people and individuals who had a very good grip on why these cards were going to get banned. And I just felt in that moment that if this is the type of person who I'm looking up to, I don't want to do it. I can't commit myself to being like that. If this is the path of this anger and resentfulness that I have to go down in order to sort of achieve a higher status in the MTG space, I'm not willing to do it. I'm not willing to compromise my morals. I'm really not. And so that is ultimately why I took a step away, was because of that response and how I perceived that response from the community. There was all these comments in the comment section of Josh's video saying something to the effect of like, yeah, go get them, fuck them. These, don't headhunt them, but send them all these aggressive emails. You get them, Josh. Josh told people to like email them and tell them how bad they were and how wrong their decision was. Not in those words, but in similar terms. This is why, to me, it took so long to make this video, because the way that I'm presenting this material to you right now is a lot more controlled. I would have been much more angry, admittedly, if I had made this video a year and change ago. So Josh, to me, has redeemed himself in a large number of ways. I am a firm believer that people deserve second chances. Firm. If somebody can show me after an insult like this that they're actually above board and their interests are aligned in the proper way, which is with promoting beneficial rhetoric to the community to incorporate and make further safe places for us to play the game, that's what I want, man. That's the type of stuff I need. And Josh did not only apologize afterward, but basically stated that that video was created in a time of excessive heat and contempt for this group of people. And those emotions had not only passed, but he thought back on them and realized that that was not the correct way to approach it. And moreover, he should have given it more time before making the video. All good things. Josh, yes, that's great. And moreover, I can actually watch the Command Zone again without feeling hatred or resentment toward this man who I previously looked up to. I don't look at him in the same light anymore. And Josh, if you're watching this video, if you for some reason or method end up finding this video or watching this video, I want to thank you personally for everything that you did for me. I was able to learn the game very effectively from your videos. In fact, I became a very astute player, so much so that I started my own YouTube channel, and here it is. But this is neither here nor there. I just want people to be very clear on my current opinion, which is I hold no grudge against Josh now. At the time I did, but I think, again, with emotions passing and more time to think about these things, and of course Josh's responses being thoughtful and promoting and more befitting of an individual of that large of a platform, he's completely redeemed himself, at least in my regard. And I don't really have any further thoughts or opinions on that specifically, but I do highly suspect that if that had not happened, if Josh had not rallied so heavily against the bans and he put out a more thoughtful response, I might have still been making videos. I think that it would have been challenging for me, but I would have still been publishing them. I really strongly believe that was a very pivotal moment for me where I realized I can't actually come back to this right now because I had such hatred of the format and the community and this person. And that was all just wrapped up in my own sort of collection of videos and how I wanted to be perceived by the community. So I felt that it was not timely for me to make a video on it, because if I did, it was going to be in such a spirit that I think it would not have been received in the spirit in which it was given. Let me put it that way. So I think this trends toward one final sort of big point for me, and that's burnout. God, I don't know how the larger YouTube channels do it, especially gameplay channels. So I recruited some friends to help me do the editing for the gameplay series that I was publishing, which I understand, I didn't necessarily need to do the gameplay series. That was something additional. But what I was encountering was doing the individual deck tech videos and doing a good job with them, because I would actually play with the deck and play test and goldfish it and make sure the mana base was appropriate and what exact lands do I want to put in. Every little decision was very thoughtful. It wasn't like I just slapped it together and threw the video out to you. There are some channels, unfortunately, that clearly do that because a lot of their decks are very samey same. There's not a lot of diversity in card choice. There's not a lot of thoughtfulness about the exact land that goes in. And I would find that my videos, my deck lists often had these very specific interactions and things that made it very much me. I was able to think, sort of beyond it, like what the play type is going to be of the deck and where it's going to arrive at the table and how it's going to be perceived and how you need to play it, even socially play it. I have lots of sections of my videos about how to socially play the deck outside of mechanically playing the deck. All of this was incorporated. I was very proud of these videos as a result. I thought that they were probably the best deck tag videos on YouTube. In fact, I still think many of them are, outside of Joey's series, where he does the Upping the Average series, I think it's called. That's a good series too, by the way. If you want more deck techs from someone that's not me, check that out. But outside of these circumstances of producing lots of these individual deck tech videos, you can see now that this track would lead to burnout, because if I'm constantly playtesting every deck and I'm posting a new deck every single week, it gets to be a bit much, because I also work a full-time job. I'm a medical person, so you can imagine there's like the stress of like my medical job on top of that. And so if I'm having to not only playtest the deck, but I have to build the damn thing first, I would end up in situations where I would have 300 cards in my inventory for what might go in the deck, notwithstanding the mana base, by the way. So it's like I gotta cut 230 plus cards out of these 300 cards. Some of them are obvious, like 100 of them are obvious, like maybe 50 of them are moderate. And then I get down to like 150 cards and I'm like, well, crap, what do I put in here? Then that's where the playtesting comes in. You try out a deck. You're like, it doesn't really work. Let's change it a little bit. You adjust it. You make some fine attunements to it. And then unfortunately, doing that over and over and over and over again, week over week, you just get to a point where you realize that this is not sustainable. One thing is going to have to break. Either I have to quit my job, which that was not going to happen, or I have to dumb down the videos in the sense of I'm not going to play test them a lot, or I'm just going to put out a video that maybe I'm not quite as proud of, which is also not acceptable to me. That was not acceptable at the time to me. Or I suppose the final thing which would come up is I would have to completely discontinue the deck techs and maybe go in a different direction. I didn't like the first two options, so I went with the third option. I decided to make gameplay videos and put those out, but I did not know what I was really getting myself in for. I did tons and tons of troubleshooting, and in the absence of spending an absurd amount of money on microphones and other systems to limit this sort of third-party noise happening around the table and get good audio capture and good video capture, it was a nightmare, a complete nightmare. And I wasn't financially in a position to afford the, $300 to $500 per microphone in order to make it really work like I wanted it to work. So I got very frustrated with the process of doing all that, with the filming process. There was maybe 3 or 4 games that we played that never even got published. That was a whole nightmare. And then I lost an editor because effectively the editor was somebody that I knew, but they didn't want to be doing it anymore. So I lost that editor. I got another editor, another one of my friends, because I couldn't pay a third-party person the price that it would cost to edit a full gameplay series. Like, to edit a full gameplay video, like we're talking about like a full day's worth of work. It's a ton of work. It's meticulous work. Things have to be just so. And I couldn't afford to pay people what they needed to be paid, which was probably like $400+ to edit that type of video and make it look good, how I wanted it to look, really get the audio down. I was actually doing all of the audio editing at the time and sending it to them so then they could add it into like the tracks and then cut out the audio tracks to like fit the material better. I was just suffering in many different ways. I was not doing exceptionally well financially because I was shelling out all this money to make the material better, which it still was not coming together, which was ultimately very frustrating for me. I was investing all this time on the back end, editing the audio and even editing some of the video myself to send it off to somebody to then finalize the product. But I also felt like it was unfair to them because I couldn't really pay them as much as I needed to pay them in order to make it seem more fair. I was paying them like $250 an episode. If that means anything to you or other editors, maybe that's fair. To me, it didn't really seem fair because of the amount of time that needed to be invested in every single edit. Like I would expect a high quality editor to charge me like $500 a video or more for that matter. So then that came up and I felt bad that I wasn't paying people as much. I was reassured by my friends at the time, no, it's fine, it's fine. But then as evidenced by my one friend departing from the project, that was one of the main things that was cited was just like the cost to time ratio just doesn't work out for me. So I can't do this anymore. And then of course my own finances suffering as a result of that. It just became unbearably stressful for me, to be transparent. And, you know, as I've already talked about, I was already having all these qualms of like the universe is beyond stuff. And then the thing with Josh when he came out, and then I interviewed the folks from the commander board. And I realized that these people are actually like fully above board on this and we're making really educated decisions. It frustrated me. You can see that there was not one thing, and I want that to be very clear. There was not one thing that caused me to step away from the YouTube channel as a whole. It was a conglomeration of things which led me to make this decision. And you know what? I think it was not only the right decision, but I feel vindicated in my decision at this point because the current trajectory of the game is so that I don't feel good about continually adding in and purchasing more material for the game. I can't support Wizards with the clear, blatant lies that have come out. I can't afford, quite honestly, to continue producing a gameplay series on the channel that would be of a high enough quality to justify your time watching it. I also would need a lot of other hardware to make that happen. We're talking probably at least another $2,000+ of just like hardware to make that realistically feasible, including like really good mics with like excellent canceling on the sides to make it easier to capture 4-pod audio at the table, or 5 mics to incorporate 4-pod audio with an off-camera personality like myself, kind of like dictating the game a little bit and talking about it. All these things come together to form the current situation, which is I have no plan of returning to doing Magic the Gathering content. I do have plans to do a separate YouTube channel, something that is more general. As you see behind me, I've been reading a lot more. I've taken up an interest in that over this past year, the time that I've been away. And quite honestly, it's been life-saving in a lot of ways for me. I've recaptured something that I thought was lost, which is my love of reading. I have expanded my horizons in many different ways. It's definitely increased my empathy, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm able to look back on the Josh situation and realize that he was just a man making a brash decision, and he recognizes it. And we can move on, and we can be happy that we moved on from that decision because he made the right choice. And you know what? That's cool. That's cool that I can come away from this situation and not only feel good about my decision to step away for my own mental health, but also realize that it made me a better person to step away from this. So if I were to go back and produce MTG content again, I don't have the full belief that I would have the best interests of the player base in mind, because I feel like I would just have to cut corners or really shell out too much money to make it a thing for limited return, and it wouldn't be financially feasible. There's parameters at play here that make it virtually impossible for me to return to producing Magic the Gathering content without me suffering in some way. And that's just not what I'm interested in. If you're interested in subscribing to my other channel, I haven't posted any videos there yet, but with plans to. I'll link it down in the description below if you wanted to sort of follow me somewhere else. And I do have I do have one more thing I guess I have to say. To all of my, let's start with patrons. To all of my patrons that supported me on Patreon and sent me very reassuring messages, and some of you have even reached out to me by email and by personal message on Patreon. I'm so sorry that I did not post. I've refunded you. You can check, or at least as long as Patreon has allowed me to. I'm going to do it right after this. I've refunded you, so you should be getting all the money back from the times that you have still been a part of the Patreon. I shut down like payments for a while, but they did like some update to Patreon and it like reinstituted payments, and I think it charged people. So I'm going to shut that down again. The Patreon's going to be cease to exist, and you're going to get a refund completely. No questions asked regarding the time of which I was departed from YouTube. I think that that's just fair, to be honest. I don't want to feel like I was a money grubbing person. I have no means or reason to keep a hold of like the $5 per month that you were spending on it. But for you personally, I think that you do deserve that. So to the full extent of my capability, I'll be refunding as much as possible to each Patreon member that was a part of that. I know there's only a couple of you, but for those of you that are listening, that's there. I also want to thank my friends. I'm sure that a lot of you are watching this video right now. I'm sure many of you got all the way to the end of this video, whether you were a part of it from the beginning, someone that maybe started me off on the journey. Thank you. Thank you for doing this for me. I feel so privileged that I've had the chance to meet so many amazing people in my life and interact with so many other amazing people online through MTG. And I think it's just a chapter of my life that is now closed. So for those of you that are still a part of my, friend circle, which most of you still are, I'm excited for what's next. I really am. I will still play MTG with you guys, I promise. Don't get me wrong. This video is not me saying I've given up completely. It's just I need to sort of narrow my scope for the game moving forward and not make it such a big part of my personality. But for those of you that are in that camp, thank you for just being amazing people. Like I am actually flabbergasted that my friends were so supportive of me throughout this whole process. I feel like there was not an incentive to be so supportive of myself throughout the process, but they were, and they were there for me. They supported me either through kind words or editing my scripts. Hey, Jacob and Elijah, how you guys doing? They supported me by being members of my gameplay series. They didn't take any payment for it, by the way. Like I would buy food for when we would get together to do the gameplay series, but they refused to take money from me because they're just excellent people. They just wanted to see the channel succeed, and they wanted to interact with other people online, which was just cool. And that opportunity has passed, but the memories of which I have of playing with everyone, the memories of getting together and filming the videos and laughing and having a great time are all going to be a part of me for the rest of my life. And not only that, I think that it was sort of necessary for me to go through this metamorphosis where I've arrived at a situation where this thing that was once, effectively, it was my life, is now behind me. And I would encourage, if anyone else is listening, I would encourage anyone else, if you are questioning these things yourself, if you're in a situation where you realize that maybe you are neglecting other parts of your life, like maybe I'm not exercising as much as I should, maybe I'm not reading books like I used to, maybe I'm not creatively fulfilled by this thing that I'm currently in, you should branch out, reach out to other people, do other things, see places, go places, do things that are not just exclusively Magic the Gathering. I hope that if this video imparts anything upon you, it's that we as a community have been largely neglected by WotC, and there's no incentive for them to turn that into something else unless they do that for us. But that's it. My camera's about to die, so good timing. I love everyone. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey. And yeah, if you want to follow me further, I'm going to post my other channel down in the description. But good luck out there. If you continue playing, enjoy it. Enjoy your time. See you guys later. Bye.